Parliament's Committee on Home Affairs is this week considering submissions made by interested parties in relation to the Electoral Matters Bill. There are growing expectations that President Cyril Ramaphosa will announce the election date this Thursday, if not in 2 weeks from that SONA address. And that time is running out as it must be adopted into law before the general election. I am joined now by Mosa Chabane, chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs at the National Assembly. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsfeed PM this afternoon. Now, how many submissions have been received and what is the committee's role at this stage?
No, thanks very much and good afternoon to you and your viewers. We've received 14 submissions and we've started with the process. Yesterday we've invited all the 14 to give oral submissions for the committee to able to deliberate. At this stage, we have not yet started deliberating, only received oral submissions, and on Friday this week we'll then receiving responses from the IEC, Department of Home Affairs and other institutions that are affected on this process.
So it seems we're still at the infancy of this process. Is there pressure to have these amendments adopted before this year's election? And if so, what material impact will it have?
Well, there's not necessarily pressure, but I think it's a work that Parliament has to engage on so that we align all laws towards the 2024 provincial and national elections since the Electoral Act has been signed into law. That is an important thing. I think the members of the committee are aware of that, and we're geared up to deliver. Hence, we've tightened our program to reflect on this matter that is presented before us.
And Mr. Chabane, would you say there's concern that the process is being rushed, though, as there are arguments in favour of holding it off until the next Parliament?
You recall that when the Electoral Amendment Bill was tabled before Parliament, after the Constitutional Court has declared it invalid in some of the provision, we took time to consult stakeholders, society at all political parties, and NGOs. In this case, the Joint Committee, Select Committee of Security and Justice and Home Affairs, were obligated to consult with all our members of society, written comments, and that necessitated that we ought to consult members. There's no pressure at all to rush in the legislation. We're doing so because the Act has been signed into law, and it must align all the laws towards the provincial and national election of 2024.
Now, some of those organizations that made those submissions to you, those interested parties, have raised these concerns that it is seemingly rushed and that they are it's not too clear on some of the clauses that are still there about this bill as well, and that this needs to be further ventilated. What do you say to that?
You know that the last provincial and national elections, individual or candidates or independent candidates were not participating in the provincial and national elections. So this process will align within that framework for independent candidates to participate in both provincial and national elections. Those views were expressed yesterday by some NGOs, and I think we're happy that they have also recommended that some of the clauses or some of the areas that we may shift towards the 7th Parliament to be considered, and also for broader consultation. But the committee has not deliberated, as I've indicated, nor taken any decision of any clause. We've just listened to all the submissions, but I think we've taken note of the credible views that were expressed by those that have been invited yesterday.
And one of those concerns, a sticking point, is around party funding. The proposal is to give the president discretionary power to set limits on thresholds and allocations. Are you convinced that South Africans, those heading to this year's election polls, fully appreciate these changes, because those interested parties have flagged these as concern?
Parliament, I think, is convinced that since we've been interacting on the electoral bill, society or members or citizens and stakeholders contributed to this development of this amendment bill that now is into law, and are aware that there's a process undergoing that we must be able to ascertain that fairness for participation of independent candidates and also new political parties, the broader political parties that are participating in the provincial and national elections. We are aware that those are the issues that have been raised by the stakeholders. And I'm saying, confirming to you that we have not yet deliberated and taken a view on what must happen once members of the committee have deliberated. Once the committee has deliberated, the reasoning on the decision that the committee could have been taken, and communication will therefore be communicated to all citizens.
So with all these matters concerned, just considering that the matter has not yet been deliberated, as you've said, should then Parliament consider what these stakeholders are saying? Wouldn't that delay the process then of implementing this?
Whether we consider it or not, the committee is committed to finalize this process and take the report to Parliament for consideration. On Friday, we will receive responses on the submissions that have been made by the stakeholders from Independent Electoral Commission, Department of Affairs, and other institutions. And the committee after that will then be able to deliberate on all the submissions that have been made. And I think that is important to mention, so that it also empower ourselves that are interested on the process. Once all the submissions have been made and responses as the program outlines, the committee will then deliberate, and all the concerns that were raised. And I think members of the committee are equal to task to engage and reflect on those subject matters.
Well, we will be keeping a close eye on those deliberations and that feedback as well. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. That was Mosa Chabane, chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs at the National Assembly.